that people anticipated, like their expectation for how the alpha should have worked versus how it was structured. Did you get positive input out of that, or just was your mind so fully occupied with how miserable packaging for Windows and Mac OS is?
Oh, well, I'm not gonna lie. There've been some complaints, and in different places than I was expecting. And I suppose that's where my mind is.
What do you
I'm
mean by
s-
different places that you're explaining?
like, let's see. How do I say this in a way that doesn't make me sound bad?
Dude, just say it. I was the first one to complain about the whole thing, so say it.
There have been some stability issues that I was not expecting
And now I know how to
because
say it.
it's run more or less stable on my own machine, but that's making a whole bunch of assumptions that maybe aren't necessarily true of other people's machines. And that's something we got to work on. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Is there like an action you can take to work around this, get further? Like, do you test it on a bunch of different computers? Because I know
That's not
Sound
it.
Engine.
That's not it. Like so.
Well, it's building in ways to make the program more robust, more fault tolerant, handling errors that come from more interesting places. When designing a lot of these features, we assumed that there's just a small subset of places where things could become problems, but it's appearing that our initial assumptions about that were off, I suppose.
So you pulled a
What was that?
Dr. K a little bit.
No comment.
It's just that there's different implementations and people set up their computers in different ways.
Yes, and I know that when audio engineers like do testing for stuff, what they'll do is they'll listen to it on headphones, they'll listen to it on room speakers, they'll go put it in a car, they'll go put it on a TV, and basically you get a bunch of different looks at how it'll play to you, and then that'll give you insight into what needs to change at the base level so that it reaches all these different platforms like stably.
Oh yeah, certainly.
But
That's other things like when we were testing it, we're doing this development iteration thing where we just go and we test and then we rewrite some code and we test it again, we rewrite some code.
Now
Doing
recording.
that, oh boy. When you do that, you don't end up getting this long running thing where you don't figure out what happens when the application's running for 6 days in a row because you only ever run it for 20 seconds, test the thing, run it for another 20 seconds, and then you make sure everything works that way. But you can't as when you're so deep in the development process, you lose track of the fact that people run the application all day long. They might unplug and replug their cards throughout the day.
Is there a
and
way
all of
to
that?
reset? Like just every hour or so, like it just blank slates itself?
Well, except you don't want to do it every hour or so. You want to do it when it's not being used, or you have to listen for an event of somebody unplugging or replugging their card.
Got it. Okay, so it's like you got to build in the senses for this thing to understand what's going on around it.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Are there any cool features that you would consider a passion project in the future with Phonon?
Any cool features that I might consider a passion project?
Rake's crazy math shit.
Specifically not Rake's crazy math shit.
Right?
That sounds like awful, not fun to implement.
Dude, it's where it's at.
But like a good for instance is right now it's meant to send these private keys back and forth in an encumbered state. Do you foresee anything coming out that you're like, oh, that'd be a really interesting way to use this that might not be on topic right now, but may later become something kind of like NFTs for Ethereum were?
Yeah, my personal passion project for this is a dead simple non-crypto implementation of like gift cards. The idea being that instead of having assets encumbered on a chain and then you have the private key to it, you just randomly use the Phonon card to generate a public private key pair, and then someone, let's call it Vinny's Pizza Shop, stores the public key in a database and says that this key is associated with one free pizza. So then you send somebody a Phonon that's just a coupon for a free pizza, and it's not associated with a chain or anything. And then they come to Vinny's Pizza and send Vinny's the coupon, and then they check that key pair in the database, and you get your pizza, and you can trade it around. And
Okay, so
Oh,
follow up on that. How much value are we missing by only focusing on assets that exist on chain?
At least one pizza from Vinny's Pizza Shop. I can tell you that much.
Is Vinny's
So
any good?
building on
I
Vinny's
don't know.
pizza, right? Building on Vinny's pizza. If you could look at this from a messaging perspective, and let's say you create some sort of secure drop, or you want to encode secret messages, and let's say that I'm a whistleblower and I need to get something to my editor, right? Or I'm a journalist. I got a whistleblower.
You're anything but a journalist. The information you want to transfer that would upset people.
No, dude, it's not.
Yeah, you just want to talk mad shit about me to another member of the DAO.
Yeah, there we go. That sounds much better.
Yeah,
We'll do that publicly.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
No cryptography required. I think that's a really actually an excellent question. And I'm not part of the AMA. I'm just a guy interjecting. But all right. So everyone thinks about specific applications. I do want to throw in the fact that this is a primitive for private key cryptography in general. So like it's not in any way limited explicitly to blockchain assets. Anything you would want to verify with a private key, or being able to pass around that authority off chain, I mean, that's valuable. And that can be representation of an asset tracked in another way. It can be some other sort of bearer asset. It's a much more flexible primitive, than something that is limited to like a given chain. That said, though, I always feel like the magic with open source is that you make the tool as flexible as possible, and people see it and they say, okay, this is a fit for my idea that you guys hadn't even considered. So that maximum flexibility, the off-chain and other cryptographic key applications, I hope it opens a lot of doors. And that's always why I'm the most boring guy on these calls, because a lot of people are thinking about what are the specific things we can do near term with it. And for me, the more flexible the tool is, the more powerful. So yeah, that opens up a lot of doors. I don't know what each of the applications are. First things that come to mind are like decentralized IDs, Sybil resistance for voting with like a unique key. All that stuff can be powerful in different contexts. I don't know who is going to want to use those and run with those use cases, but it's definitely doable. All right, I'll shut up.
That's why I love it.
Yeah, I defer to Justin's answer on that one.
Dude, don't ever shush him. That's exactly why I love him. Like, he brings everything that I was gonna ask into a more succinct and just a concise manner.
Well,
Yeah.
a question with the memo, or if you were to send someone, let's say, a gift card, is there a way in Phonon to see when that private key has been opened? So would you be able to know that your message has been received or your gift card has been used?
No. I mean, the Phonon exists only on the card that it exists on, and when it's sent, all information about that Phonon is deleted from the card. So the only way to check for the use of a Phonon is if somebody does something with it that's trackable. You know, if someone
Well,
redeems your Phonon, you can look at its address on the chain.
yeah. So how about you centralize the creation of the Phonon on a chain, and then redemption happens through that contract, and then you could have a way to see if it's done.
Well, I was thinking of it more as just kind of an understanding of, how the privacy aspect works with crypto and kind of how that would relate to a message as well.
It works.
So in other words, like you wouldn't be able to just see what someone else has, or so no one else would be able to check the balance on that card until it's revealed if it was a gift card or something. You would just know it has this.
You'd have to have the public address on some other sort of proprietary ledger. So you don't have a balance without the public ledger itself, the blockchain. But say for something like physical access or gift card redemption, you could have it preset that there's a limited, you could have just a database of public key signatures. So for example, like, all right, dumb example, because they can already do this with a proprietary database, but Dave and Buster's, you get your cards, you can have a balance maintained, sign, support all this sort of infrastructure without with an off-the-shelf solution. I don't think this is the best application for it, but it's an example in which you can have a unique ID that is limited to one person holding a given hardware, piece of hardware. Limited to one key pair that can only be transferred between one hardware owner at a time for physical access, for club membership, for something like that. So it's possible, but to actually have like a balance of assets, then you need a distributed ledger.
There is like a tax stack where you implement this whole ring signatures, but that's another story. I think his question was actually more related to actually the cryptography and the difference between cryptography and cryptocurrencies, if I'm not mistaken. Was that it, Snaps?
Kind of. I was just curious, like, if let's say I was to wrap Ethereum in Phonon and send it to someone, and they sent it to someone else, and it got sent down the line. If there was a way through Phonon to know, oh, interesting, that ETH that I had or that NFT that I had, someone actually unwrapped it. Now it's for sale on OpenSea, kind of a thing.
You can make a
Well, it's not
contract
even.
that doesn't swap the assets, but holds the assets and then swaps the rights to move them. But I think that kind of gets a little navel gazy.
So what it would look like.
I mean, oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, if you were looking at an Etherscan, all you would see when a Phonon is created, it looks like you're transferring to another account. No one knows that account is a Phonon. It's a private key. That it could look like any other externally owned account. All you would see that when someone redeems it, it moves out of that. You don't know how many hops it makes in the interim, and that's sort of one of the things that results in these privacy preserving qualities, is that opacity about what happens while it's held in that given key. Like, it doesn't look different if you're tracking it on chain.
So let's say that in the future you actually manage to buy a Monet and it becomes an NFT, and you want to just like walk around with your Monet and a card or something.
Chain.
Well, but I think that's an interesting point that Justin made, is that you can be using Phonon, and as far as everyone knows, it's just a regular ETH or Bitcoin or whatever transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Would there be any provable way in the event that you needed to put things on a tax statement to say, I no longer have this asset?
No.
No, I mean, even now, if you transfer between two externally owned accounts, it's up to you to self-report, at least from like a US perspective. So yeah, would that screw up something if you're doing something automated, like using token tax? Sure. But that's a consideration you'd have to make before wrapping something as a Phonon and moving it around like that.
Yeah, the token tax is a very interesting idea. Someone who puts like a 10% tax every time you transfer a crypto, you could put it on Phonon and sell it as many times as you wanted until someone withdrew it. It's an interesting idea.
While that could theoretically be technically possible, I don't advocate tax fraud.
Well, no,
I think we're talking about different things here.
On-chain tax. Question for you, Nate. Going back to Phonon, like, and how it's supposed to be used. What is the biggest hurdle that you have with doing coins that are not the gas token for a chain, such as, let's say, USDT or Aave, other regular ERC20s, etc., NFTs?
There's a couple of things to consider when doing things outside of the standard token for a chain. The gas fees are paid in the regular token, which, shoot, I almost posted a write-up about this the other day, and then I deleted it because I didn't like it. The biggest hurdle is I got to be honest, there's not really that much in the way of hurdles to it. It's just something you got to do.
Is it just getting the gas there so that you can then move it off?
You just got to bundle it within like the same.
Yeah, there's well, this gets to another issue where if you have a Phonon that's worth say a small amount of ETH, and you wish to redeem it, it may cost more ETH than the Phonon has to redeem it. So you would end up having to deny the you deny the transaction, or you can do another transaction that costs its own ETH to add more ETH to that Phonon, so you can then redeem it. But then you're losing a bunch. So the UI just has to be worked out to make that the way that works clear to the user and kind of elegant, so that you can decide if you want to load more token onto a Phonon before doing transactions with it. And then that same problem exists for whatever the non-base token is on whatever chain.
So would you
Makes sense.
consider encoding some kind of like hard floor on an asset's value based on its chain, or is that just like way over the
Not part of the core protocol.
Yeah.
Core protocol is just about
or the applet maybe, like into
yeah.
the app itself?
Well, I wouldn't do that in the applet. In the all right, sorry, I guess that'd be a UI consideration, and yes, but it wouldn't be part of the core protocol.
Heard.
Another question on that: what would happen with the transaction if, let's say, you made an Ethereum transaction and it was 20 Gwei, and then all of a sudden a gas war happened and it went up to 200 and stayed there?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way to work around? Because at that point the private key has been exposed when you try to withdraw it. Is there any way to boost the gas if you had a stuck transaction?
So that is another consideration that's going to be a lot of UI work to figure out. How do we? First off, we have to store that private key somewhere and hold on to it until the gas price goes back down, or until the user can decide what to do with it. At present moment, with the test net, if that happens, believe it either gets locked in your MetaMask or goes away, depending on exactly when the problem occurred. And that's
so you're saying the private key actually stays encumbered until the point of transaction? Is that correct?
No, the private key is pulled out of the Phonon before the transaction is made. Because the transaction is made not from the Phonon card, but from your your MetaMask wallet, or whatever Web3 provider or not Web3 provider, but from. It's made elsewhere. It's made by your computer. So the private key is extracted before then. And you can't load it back in there because it's been exposed to the real world, and that'll offer double spending and problems. So we need to work out a solution for holding on to those private keys and giving the user the opportunity to either wait to do something with them, import them into their wallet and do whatever they want with that, or to just delete them and let them go.
And with transactions being sped up, I mean, so that's just drop and replace with the same nonce on EVM chains, at least. I don't know how that would work, or if there is even a possibility of doing that for non-EVM chains. But that's like a UI thing, because you can just resubmit and the original request will be dropped from the mempool once one with the same nonce gets processed first. So definitely doable, not limited by the protocol, more constrained by the kind of asset that you have a Phonon for.
All right, so I see in the chat box, Hunt_AK says, right now at the testnet, the biggest user issue I see right now is who is online right now. Just like when I send Venmo payment to a buddy and days later, they finally reply, got it. I think implementation of the claim later feature would be a big value add to the protocol. Are we compiling a list of things to add to the protocol to enhance its overall usage based on early testnet feedback? Yes, we are compiling lists of things to add to both the protocol and the UI to increase usability. One of the things I'm working on right now with the protocol is allowing the receiver of a Phonon to verify if they wish to receive a Phonon before it's sent, where each Phonon send is not just this blind thing where you send it off and then the other person receives it and that's it, where it's an involved process of my client sends a request to your client, or sends an offer to your client. Your client can look at the public keys, check against the chain, see what's going on, see if I'm lying about the value of the phonons, and if I am, if you care, and then it can come back to me and say yes, send them, and then my client sends them to your client. We're working on that process, adding that to the protocol right now. As for UI things, we're gonna have to work on eventually. The storage of phonons that have been exposed but have not been transacted with, and local transfers between two local cards plugged in. It's going to be an important UI enhancement. What else is there? Yeah.
Is there any way or any implementation you plan to let someone know, hey, I want to send you something? Such as hooking up your email or something like that? Or is that intended to be done outside of the Phonon ecosystem?
Yeah, that would be less of a protocol question and more of a client implementation. So yes, our client is probably going to have something like that, but it's not like a pure Phonon thing. That's just a usability in the Phonon ecosystem sort of thing.
And just to clarify, to make sure I understood and anyone else here, both people have to be online with their cards engaged and online in order to send and receive. Is that correct?
Yes, the security relies on having having an encrypted channel between two cards, and both cards have to verify the legitimacy of the other side. So they both have to be online to have that back and forth.
For now.
Yeah, how does that get worked around?
Well, I was actually going to ask, kind of with that, to my understanding, if I was to use this to pay, let's say, a Burger King or something, and they had Phonon in the future, they would have a system where their card is always online and yours comes online at the point of transaction in like the drive-through, right?
Yeah, something like that. They'd have a server somewhere that has 500 cards plugged in, all doing transactions across the country, and then you'd plug into it, and you'd plug into a reader and unlock your card. And
so how different is that, or how similar is that to a current credit card with a chip when I'm plugging it in at a register?
It's a lot less similar than it looks. As far as I understand it, actually, no, I don't know exactly how a credit card transaction works.
Well, I know they got to be plugged into the internet, so there's probably a verification step with a central database. That we would not.
There's a lot of fees involved.
Yeah, and I don't understand it fully either, but my understanding is when you're plugging in your credit card and it's doing its thing, it's actually booting up the chip in the credit card, and then it comes online, and then it confirms the transaction, and then it goes through. That's kind of what Phonon is doing if you were to just focus on that, though, correct? In a way?
That's a
It's just not
strangely worded
peer-to-peer.
question, and the answer could be yes or no, depending on exactly what you meant. So I'm going to not answer that right now.
How would one go about breaking the entire system then?
If you wish to break the entire system, that would be bad. No, the system relies on the security given by the PUF chip. So if you could find a vulnerability that makes the PUF no longer physically unclonable, then that would break the system.
Could I also break into GridPlus headquarters and like swap out your certification chip so that the whole thing is right at the beginning?
I've never been to GridPlus headquarters. I don't know that I don't think headquarters exists.
There's obviously headquarters.
I think there's a warehouse that we pretend is headquarters.
We're all in our mom's basement right now.
Yeah.
But question on the peer-to-peer transferring, is there any reliance on any other server or system? Or as long as anyone has a Phonon card, or two parties, I should say, have a Phonon card plugged in and online, they'd be able to transfer with it?
There is at present moment, the way we have our client set up It uses a Jumpbox server. However, it could be anyone could just run that server. The code is within your Phonon client that you have installed. And you can just run the Jumpbox command, and that'll launch a Jumpbox server, and you can just connect through anyone's Jumpbox. So it does rely on that. We're working on a peer-to-peer implementation that relies on no external anything.
So when you say jump box, does that mean if I wanted to transfer to another party, both of our cards have to be plugged in and a third card would have to be available? Or
No.
those two cards can just transfer between themselves in the program with nothing else?
Yeah, basically, your card is hooked up to your card is hooked up to your card reader, which is hooked up to your computer. Your computer is running an instance of the client, and then the client sends commands to the jump box. The other person does the same thing, and then the jump box just relays relevant commands back and forth between the two clients, which then forward the commands to their cards, which allows for the entire protocol to work.
So what is the value or the intent of mining with a Phonon card?
Mining native phonons is the intent is to just have another form of
Asset.
another form of currency that you can use that doesn't rely on a chain. We suspect that what's eventually going to happen with mined phonons is that they're going to become sort of a change-making operation where, maybe if you're buying a burger that costs $7 and you only have a phonon for $6.58, then the remaining 42 cents you could get in native phonon. Don't really expect that native phonon is going to be worth so much that you're doing like entire transactions in it, but it'd be a useful, just small value currency to facilitate making exchanges smoother. Though, like any cryptocurrency, it could skyrocket and whatnot. And the value comes from it the same place the value comes for any crypto. It's just the scarcity. And the the verifiability. It can only come from Phonon cards that are allowed to mine.
So just to make sure I understand, outside of 2 users holding a card, there is no way for the network to go down.
Yeah, as long as as long as there's card readers and computers are available, there's no way for the network to go down. It's the same as long as two people have dollar bills and can hand it to each other. There's no way for cash to stop.
And there's just to understand that point as well, like when you hear about proof of work or other things, there's like 51% attacks, proof of stake. With just two cards there, how does that enhance or make the security different from something where you have a large group of validators versus just two peers interacting with each other?
I don't know. I haven't thought about that.
Because there's not really any way for someone else to come in and try and alter your transaction or approve or disapprove. It's just between the two parties, correct?
Yes.
Is there any, I guess to reword the question, you can continue with the not having an answer at this point, but is there any caveat in that would make this more of a trusted system versus a trustless system where you don't need trust between the two parties?
I mean, the trust comes from the certificates signed on the cards themselves. So I don't know.
Yeah, I understand it's a simple question that has a lot of complicated, like, extra to it. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting thought.
All right, so highflyer.eth, two quick questions. In what frequency can we expect new versions to arrive in the coming weeks? Probably once every couple of days we'll be putting... we get new versions just as we put more code into the code base. Had one probably every couple of days. We usually have a new minor version coming out. I feel in current state there are several issues that restrict my testing efforts. Yes, we have gotten that, and we are working to make it better each and every day. Will we be able to, in the future, use our lattice for Phonon transfers? At some point, likely.
It is more than probable.
Yes, it is more than probable.
Highly probable.
Highly probable, yeah.
Highly probable.
Additional question, would love to try the command line interface under Windows. How do I do that? Yeah, that's a weird thing that happened. I don't know what happened, but in packaging the Windows app into an MSI installer, when it is unpackaged and installed, the application runs just fine when run from the Windows launcher or from the shortcut, but it doesn't allow you to run it directly from the console. And I don't know why. Currently, the easiest way to do it is going to be to build from source. I can add the raw standalone Phonon.exe to the release, which I suppose would also solve that. So then you can just use that exe file. Big hurdle is initially getting started. If there's no MetaMask, just displays a blank page, no warning. I do need to fix that, actually. I can't get phone to detect the cards, so can't do /test anything. Not sure what's up with that.
Nate, do you want to go through the list of bugs?
No. Thanks for asking.
Unappealing.
That doesn't sound like fun. Let's see. GCC compile, obviously. Okay. Any additional questions? Or are we going to start going through the list of bugs?
You tell us about your car.
The implementation within IoT solutions seems to be not only pretty easy, right? But quite.
I really like the idea of IoT Phonon because IoT can mean anything. So it's like, yeah, I need to send my toaster a 0.1 ETH Phonon, or else it's not going to toast my toast.
You could probably have all sorts of rental setups with that, you know?
Yeah, I can rent my toaster from Phonon Corp Toasters.
Well, that'd be pretty awesome, wouldn't it? We'll start a cell phone company and a toaster rental company.
Yes.
I mean, you could build like a store of vending machines. I guess you could already do that with existing shit, though, so it's not really groundbreaking in the way that off-chain transfers are.
Is there anything that you wish you would have done differently at this point, or do you just feel like it's too early to tell?
There's a lot of stuff. I don't know if there's anything I would have done too differently. It's just that there's a lot of things, and if there was more time to have worked on it, then it would be more fleshed out and it would probably be a lot nicer to work with. But it's not like I would have focused on anything else specifically.
So you need to get better at getting other people to do work for you, is what you're saying.
Some might say that, yeah. But
is there anything in terms of like the client right now that you feel like might be better served as like a separate client? Like I know currently the jump box, it sounds like is built into the client. Could you see a future where jump boxes maybe take on more work and are kind of their own thing, almost like, a validating node and other blockchains? I'm just trying to think of like as Phonon scales and maybe people want to do more complicated things, like build dApps that somehow interface with phonons. I know it's going like way down the future, but like, have you thought about any alternative architectures that you might want to explore?
Well, yeah. The thing about it is, the client just to make a Phonon transfer happen, a client just has to be able to somehow get the transfer packets out of one card and into the other card. And how that happens really is the protocol is agnostic to. So right now we have the jump box implementation because it was a fairly simple thing. I was able to code it up over the course of a couple of weeks, and it works not perfectly, but okay. But the next thing is to do a P2P implementation, where instead of going through a central server, it just goes directly peer-to-peer. If you're doing it as like an exchange, then you have the client application that is going to be communicating with the server application that also works as that exchange, or as the carrier of those messages from Phonon cards in a totally different context, and it's going to work totally differently, and it's going to look different. So as it comes to the jump box specifically, that's just an implementation detail for peer-to-peer transfers, and
It's just
or not for peer-to-peer transfers, but for individual to individual transfers. And there can be a lot of different ways to implement the thing of the simple task of transferring a Phonon packet from one card to another.
it's kind of like just the native architecture of the Java crypto extension, the bouncy castle. But that does bear the question though. If we can implement something and actually beef up the entire protocol, can we actually have decentralized identities? Or, I mean, if we can, then that does mean we can also implement Dane, DTLS, PGP as a whole, even SSH keys or certs being issued by key derivation function, right?
Yes, if we add all those things to the protocol, they will be in the protocol.
Yeah, Nate, just
I mean,
another question, maybe to help understand a little bit about Phonon. What is kind of the vision that you and the other devs are currently building towards as far as Phonon?
I can't speak to anyone else's vision, but I take a very simple approach of do one thing and do it well, which is going to be just facilitate secure transfers of crypto assets. Between people. Oh, Jesus. Rake is DMing me. Facilitate secure assets of crypto, or secure transfers of crypto assets between people, free of intrusion, free of surveillance. That's what I want to see.
Is there anything that you feel for a let's just say a corporate body to take on Phonon that you would have to change versus a more retail focused model, kind of like it's in right now?
What do you mean?
So right now, if I'm just doing peer to peer, that's great. But if I wanted to use that in another setting that's not just me and another person, let's say to pay as a transaction for a cup of coffee or something like that, are there any needs that you see in the development to be able to facilitate a more corporate level transfer of peer to peer?
Before we can sell it to Starbucks or whatever, we'll probably have to implement the Phonon protocol on some secure enclave that isn't a Java card, just given the fact that it's a card that weighs almost nothing and can be crushed in the hand and rendered totally useless. If they're expecting a card to handle, and additionally, it just takes time for those cards to run, and it's not the most reliable like hardware in the universe. So we have to port the applet, or at least the app, the core protocol code to some beefier secure element that that can run on faster hardware with a better network connection and handle more requests at once. That would make it more suitable for like the back end of a payments platform. What else?
But how about the mobile app application?
Mobile application. There's some interesting things with that. Yeah, there are a lot of interesting things with that. We could implement a mobile application that runs on the same Phonon cards using the NFC on your phone. So you just attach your phone to the card. Otherwise, the secure element in the cards is essentially the same hardware as what's running on a SIM or even an eSIM, and you could run the Phonon applet on those things. It's a little difficult to get to the point where you can access the SIM as a consumer application running on a phone, but we did some research and it is totally possible, and people are going down similar routes for their own things, which would be something to look into in the future, because then it'd be very easy, because then anyone could have Phonon running on their phone.
Can you please tell them that it was both you and me?
Yes, Rake is trying to give me credit for his doing all this research to figure out exactly how we can go down that path.
That's not true. You did a lot of research too, but it took you like 2 weeks, and it just took me about a little less.
So going back to making the cards more robust,
Yes.
what are your thoughts on being able to recover, let's say, a lost card or a damaged card?
If recovery is possible, you would have to be able to prove that the first card is destroyed entirely. Otherwise, that will allow for phonons to exist in two places at once, and that would become so complicated that it's
There is
not
another
feasible.
There is another solution to this. It requires you to centralize the creation of phonons in a single smart contract and then build into the phonon a slow redeem function that would cost you some small amount to call. And then 30 days later, or some amount of time, if you hadn't checked in with that smart contract with the original phonon, it would then reissue you a phonon. But that's like a whole bunch of complication that is not my field.
Well, with that, so currently the data is stored on the card itself.
Yes.
So if the card is damaged and that data is lost, anything held by that card would be lost by proxy, right?
Yes.
So is there any kind of solution that you see working towards in the future that would make that less of a possibility? Such as a
Have a
backup
case for your
card, such
phone.
as
You could have a
yeah.
you have a case for your Phonon card. No, I mean anything that's any backup is going to allow for the possibility of double spending. So either you have to come up with some scheme where you can invalidate the first card once the phonons get loaded onto the second card, which would require a whole bunch of networking and sending out lists of which cards are still valid and which cards are no longer valid, which doesn't work in a peer-to-peer environment. Or you'd have to do some sort of centralized smart contract that allows people to, that whole thing, which also breaks the peer-to-peer aspect of it. In the same way that if I am holding my wallet and I drop it down a sewer, I lose all the cash in that wallet. Phonon kind of works the same way in its current iteration, and I'm not sure exactly what the plans would be to change that. And I'm not necessarily eager to go down that road.
Oh, I'm there already. Crypto node, ring signatures, bulletproofs.
Buzzwords, spaceships.
So I like the idea of how Phonon is kind of buckets. You could put, 0.1 ETH, 0.10 ETH, or not 0.1 ETH, 1 ETH, 10 ETH, and spend it kind of like cash and send that private key around. Do you see in the future any kind of recommended implementation of certain denominations? Or any kind of auto splitting denominations? Such as if you have 22.5 ETH, it would recommend maybe you make that 2 buckets of 10, 2 buckets of 1, and then 5 buckets of 0.1 ETH.
I think the standard denominations are kind of going to be kind of emergent as people use the system. I mean, there's no central authority that's going to be going around saying that the standard denominations of Phonon are, 1 ETH, 2 ETH, 5 ETH, 10 ETH, 20 ETH, 50 ETH, and 100. We don't have the Fed, or I guess that'd be the Treasury, not the Treasury, the Mint. We don't have the Mint. I think it's going to depend a lot on people's use case. If you're buying something that's relatively low value, it makes sense to have just a bunch of phonons of various different denominations, so that you can just make change and get everything as close to the price that you're transacting at as possible. Though, I don't know. I assume people are just going to do powers of 10.
Well, I mean, like when I spend cash, just to elaborate on that, I have bills that are 50, 20, 10, 5, 1, and then change, which most people don't really care to keep in their pocket. With the change maker, and I know it's a little bit early at this point, do you have any details on how you would or are planning to implement that? Like what that kind of would look like? Would it create new? Would it reveal and then create new private keys, or would you even consider depositing more assets into an already existing private key or wallet? We'll say.
There were a lot of discussions about change making in the past. Not to deflect your question or anything, and it seems like a change making feature would just be part of what an exchange does, wherein you would have you have your order book, and somebody might say, I am willing to give you $1 phonon for 10 cent phonons, and it could be part of an exchange. Otherwise, a specific change making service could be put up that only does that, maybe for a small fee, so that maybe you get 99 cents back for every dollar, but you get 99 cents in change when you give them a dollar or whatever. The DAO may have to do some initial seeding of that to come up with very low value phonons that ordinarily wouldn't make sense to make the transaction for on the chain, but does make sense if you're assuming that they're going to stay as phonons and just lubricate the whole system over time.
So are you saying even like I would have, let's say, the 0.1 ETH, 1 ETH, 10 ETH kind of denominations, but I could also hold a synthetic asset, so to speak, to make the changes I needed that would not be necessarily a private key pair?
I mean, the only...
would there be any way for us to hold quote-unquote change that would not be a private key, to be able to make that change ourselves or anything like that?
No, the only real way to do that is going to be to have phonons for those very small values. And just make trades for those.
A common question I've actually gotten, I just want to ask this just to get your answer. Is Phonon in any way like a blockchain?
There's no blocks, and it's not on chain. Not really a ledger. It's used to facilitate transactions. So in any way, yes. Fundamentally similar, no.
Okay.
What was the first programming language you learned?
First programming language I learned, I don't know, I guess it would be Arduino C. Well, I didn't really get very good at it. Python in college? Bash? I'll go with Python.
Python? Nice. What's your favorite programming language?
I don't pick favorites. Actually, my favorite programming language is the language that I use when I try to describe things to other engineers. where it sounds similar to English, but actually doesn't make any sense in English and can't be compiled. But it's a programming language that I think in and try to communicate in, and it never works. But I love it.
Nice.
That's why we turn on the cameras and we just wow, woo, make all these sounds and whatnot.
Exactly. All right, what do we got? 5 minutes left. Anything else? Talk about secure enclaves, says Rake in the DMs.
Secure enclaves at the station. Up to you, Nate.
I don't really have too much to say.
Okay, so how about membership proofs?
Ownership proofs.
Yeah.
Yeah, the current draft for the protocol for proving ownership of assets works as follows. The sending card creates a list of the pub keys and information about the assets allegedly associated with those pub keys, and then sends that list over to the receiving card, where the receiving card gets those pub keys and what they're supposed to be, and then checks their respective chains to verify that that what is there. At which point, the receiving card sends back to the sending card, saying that this transaction is okay. And the sending card sends the phonons over, which solves the proving what phonons have what assets problem that we currently have in the protocol as it stands. I'm working on implementing that right now.
You see side channel attacks as a possibility of a protocol.
What do you mean side channel attacks?
What?
Like specifically?
What?
What?
Yeah, I did. I couldn't hear.
So what specifically do you mean by side channel attacks?
So a side channel attack would be probably it would allow a malicious actor to observe a particular set of inputs and construct the same transaction.
Yes.
Kind of
The transactions are generated on the card. The sender card's client will send a request for transaction to that card, and then currently, as I have the draft of the protocol, then the card will lock down those phonons in a pending send state, along with a specific unique identifier for that transaction before it starts sending off the list of phonons, which
great. Yeah, so that mitigates both the double spend and the side channel access pattern.
Yes.
Is there some sort of like software lock for the card itself? Like once you've deployed the certificate and the code specific to Phonon, like do you lock that card, or could someone still like wipe that card? Or
the card can be wiped, but it can't be edited, so they can't change the behavior of the card.
Okay, so they couldn't like deploy an additional applet or anything.
They could, but it wouldn't be able to access the information stored in this applet. And then, yeah.
Gotcha. Unless there was some sort of like underlying, security issue in Java card.
Exactly.
Hey, I got a question. I was just listening in and I thought of this. I don't know if this is even something you'd want to entertain, but the way these Phonon cards are set up with the puff chip, would there be a way to, let's say you have 10 of those cards and each one of them is loaded with, various assets, different denominations, almost like you've got a a pocket full of $20 bills, $5 bills, $1 bills, and $100, all these different denominations. Would there be a way to use like a phone and like near field communication to at least see what assets are imbued on it and the amount? And that way, if you're out and about with somebody and, you know, not necessarily to do a transaction, but at least you could say, hey, I've got this Phonon card with these assets on it, kind of like a gift card. Is there a way that you could use NFC communication just to see the wallet of wallets that are sitting on a Phonon card?
You'd have to. I mean, you'd have to each one go up and tap it. But yeah, NFC. Basically, I guess without getting into the specifics of how these cards work, NFC is just another way to send commands to the cards, and an NFC Phonon app totally work. I had a basic demo of just talking to a card working a long time ago, but we moved on to focusing more on the alpha, not the test net. So I can't like show you how that works, but yeah, that'd be totally a use case. I mean, totally a thing you can do.
It'd be like a pretty neat app just to be able to quickly see,
Yeah.
you know, anybody else's phone. If they have the app, they can at least look at the card and see what's on it, even if they don't.
Yeah, you
have
still have
the
to have the unlock code
PIN,
to unlock that
right.
that Phonon card. So
Gotcha.
it's not like it's completely out there in the open.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So if anyone has any final pressing matters to take up with me, you know,
Yeah,
you want to challenge me to a fight, whatever.
someone just DM'd me here, and they want to know if you could explain that both the attestation process alongside why is it beneficial for the entire protocol to have cards being attested from the initial steps, and does that factor into trusted execution environments?
Sorry, ask the second part again.
It's a TE based question. So the first part is related to how does attestation work and why does it secure the protocol?
Okay.
And the second one is where do trusted execution environments come into the protocol?
So, sorry, I don't like using the word attestation because it means a handful of different things. So I'm going to say use a more direct word. So I'm not going to answer it with the word attestation. So in the protocol, when you create a Phonon and you associate assets with it by sending them to the Phonon's wallet associated with its private key, you can then do what's called setting a descriptor, where you give a short description of what's on the Phonon. That description is not a guarantee of anything, because that is set by the client and it's arbitrarily set on the Phonon. So when sending a Phonon to another person, we are working on a protocol right now, or working on the addition to the protocol right now, make it so that a list of the proposed to be sent Phonons are sent to the receiver, who can then verify those assets on chain before accepting the transaction. And then the reason to believe that the other Phonon card is telling the truth about what their assets are, and that they'll be about the fact that they own those assets, is because the execution all takes place on the PUF of the Phonon card,
Which is the TE.
which is the trusted execution environment. Basically, the people who manufacture the cards give a guarantee that that card cannot be cloned and the data cannot be extracted out of it without destroying it entirely and rendering it useless. So the data on there is safe, and then we are the ones that load up the applet onto it. And then we sign then a certificate is generated on that card, That certificate cannot be extracted, or not the certificate, but the private key cannot be extracted, and then we sign that certificate. So then every card has a guaranteed legitimate copy, and it can be a copy of the applet that cannot be
Can only be
forged.
trademarked by the manufacturer, and since it's ingrained within like the initial steps, it's always been verified from the factory. But how does that
Exactly.
scale?
Each and every time you connect your card to your computer verifies that it's
No,
a
I'm
officially
not,
signed.
then, and this is me now. I'm not talking about like the whole key derivation function, but and just like switching. But I'm actually asking, how would that scale within the current implementation where we're using physical cards?
Every single time a card is flashed, it's also signed. You can sign as many cards as the current implementation we're doing uses a YubiKey. So the theoretical
Right.
maximum is how fast YubiKey can sign things.
Yeah, I think I'm probably phrasing this wrongly.
How many cards can we make?
Yeah, which factors into the entire question of when we bring in third-party hard manufacturers, how do we verify that they're also compliant to the attestation, which we've implemented from?
I don't know. That's going to be, I suppose, a DAO
Yeah.
process that's going to have to be developed.
Would facilitate a lot. It seemed, from my perspective, it would facilitate a lot if we go down, if you had the eSIM implementation and the applet being
I'm-
loaded from within a profile. But I might
I'm
just,
going to go ahead and echo Nate here and say that we should get away from using the term attestation.
Please, I was echoing you the first time you said that, Tuesdays. You
Damn,
said it
I
once
was
and I
looking for
Googled it and I was like,
that.
what the hell is attestation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's some considerations to be made. You have to make sure that whoever's making Phonon cards or whatever Sims you're putting it on are legitimate from a reputable company, and then you have to make sure that the signing keys aren't just written down on a piece of paper that some factory worker types in every morning as they start up the production lines. You gotta guarantee that there's some safety around there, and then you have to make sure that there's no supply chain attacks and things of that nature. It is a tough problem to deal with from like a as the DAO trying to regulate the people making the cards. So I don't know. Something to figure out, I suppose. All right, so it's 3:08. If there's no further questions, can end the meeting. I'll get off the hot seat.